Hello and welcome to the special digital exclusive here on CNN News 18 with me, Aditya Raj Kaul. The spate of killings against the minorities in Kashmir has yet again begun. How long will the minorities in Kashmir suffer? 32 years after the Kashmiri Pandit exodus that forced more than 4 lakh Kashmiri Pandits out of the Kashmir Valley, yet again the minorities, Hindus, as well as the Sikh communities have been targeted in the last 48 hours in the Kashmir Valley. This amidst claims by the central government that this is a Naya Kashmir after the abrogation of Article 370, where the Kashmiri Pandits could be actually rehabilitated, and certainly there will be a free flow of tourism as well as development in Kashmir. What about the protection and sense of security to the hapless community of Kashmiri Pandits, the remaining few hundred that are left in Srinagar and neighboring districts? Joining us live on this special district exclusive on CNN News 18 is prominent author and senior editor and journalist Rahul Pandita. Rahul, thank you very much for joining me. I want to begin by asking you, you yourself are a Kashmiri Pandit and one of the few who has written about the exodus, Amuna's blood clots, the acclaimed memoir. What are your thoughts, your initial thoughts on the killings that have happened in the last 48 hours? ML Bindru, Birinder Paswan, even Mohammad Shafi Lone, and now, two teachers, two government school teachers, a Sikh and a Dogra in Kashmir Valley.
Let's consider the sequence of events, Aditya, really. This morning at about 11:15 a.m., there are unidentified number of terrorists who barge into a government school, huddle up all teachers and ask for identity papers of all teachers, and then single out one Sikh lady and one Hindu teacher from Kashmir, and they are put to bullets. Less than 48 hours earlier, there's a street vendor, poor street vendor, who just selling his ware on the streets of Srinagar. There's a man who approaches him from behind and kills him. In a similar fashion, the prominent Kashmiri Pandit chemist who ran perhaps one of the oldest chemist shops in Srinagar is gunned down. Now we can have a debate about, on social media about whether terrorism has a religion or not. In fact, that along with Kashmiri Hindus, the minority groups like Sikhs, etc., Muslims have also been targeted in Kashmir. The fact remains that there are terrorists in Kashmir today who are singling out people based on their identity cards and killing them. So let's call a spade a spade. It's a redux actually of the 90s when you have had this fear psychosis among the minority Kashmiri Pandits and other Hindus and Sikhs living in Kashmir Valley. I just shared on Twitter a short video of a Sikh gentleman who thankfully has the courage to call a spade, and he says that we are not feeling safe here. You and I know that, in the last 48 hours, we have spoken to so many people from our community, from the Hindu community in Kashmir, and they feel unsafe. Even as we, just 5 minutes back, I received a call from an old friend who's a government servant there. He's taking a cab tomorrow morning and leaving for Jammu indefinitely till he feels a little safe. So things are not all right in Kashmir Valley as we speak.
The fear psychosis has set in, as you rightly pointed out, that many Kashmiri Pandits have been calling us in the last 48 hours, some seeking security, some asking questions about what will happen now, what is the situation, and some perhaps just don't know what to do. And this kind of a sense of insecurity hasn't been really witnessed among the Valley Pandits in a long, long time. But what has led to this? Do you feel that this is a systematic security failure, in particular in Srinagar? Because perhaps there were inputs that Kashmiri Pandits could be targeted. So do you see this as a both security as well as an intelligence lapse?
I think, let's be clear on a couple of things. There have been credible intelligence reports doing rounds at least from the evening of September 21. Right? You've independently received those intelligence inputs. But in the name of providing security, what the police did so far was provide a couple of guards outside a prominent sweet shop run by a Hindu in the heart of Srinagar. and send a couple of cops to a Hindu temple nearby, asking them to switch off the lights. We have time and again since 21st September raised concerns about the fact that there are intelligence reports about the fact that there's a possibility of minority killings in Kashmir. Now, I can still understand that the randomness of choosing poor Golgappa wala somewhere on a street and killing him. But even after credible inputs, if you cannot stop the killing of prominent chemist in the heart of Srinagar, who should have been on your radar for a long, long time in terms of security, then as far as I'm concerned, as an old Kashmir watcher, I think it's absolute security failure on the part of police.
Rahul, as a Kashmir watcher, as you said, you've reported from Kashmir continuously. You have been observing the developments ever since the abrogation of 370 as well. Do you feel that there is some kind of a disconnect between the government and what happens on ground in reality? On one, after 370, there were claims made that terrorism will reduce, security situation will improve, development will come in, tourism will come in, which of course it did, but also on Kashmiri Pandits, where it was said that rehabilitation will happen without realizing that there was no sense of security to those, even for that matter, PM package employees who actually go to the valley and every few months have to return either because of a threat or some targeted assassination.
We have seen the letter written to Lieutenant Governor by Mr. Sanjay Tikku, who heads the body of Kashmiri Pandits, those who chose to stay back. It says very clearly about the intelligence inputs. It says about the threat. He writes clearly about the threat perception. He writes clearly about the fact that the Kashmiri Pandit body has sought time and again from the LG to address their concerns, but no time has been given. So on one hand, you are doing these decorative measures like putting up national Indian flag everywhere. Um, uh, there is a flood of social media posts falsely saying that it is for the first time since 1990 that Kashmiri Pandits have been able to celebrate Janmashtami in Kashmir. Absolutely false. For how long, there have been little celebrations here and there. But at the same time, absolutely failing to provide any semblance of security to those who've chosen to stay back in Kashmir Valley. So I think that's a complete security lapse. Now, after the killing has happened, now you're asking a prominent Kashmiri Pandit here and there to shift from one place to another for security reasons, etc. That is what we are hearing now. But unfortunately, that is futile. And time and again, we have seen this in Kashmir. On one hand, you're providing all kinds of security to separatist militants, to leaders. Time and again, you have said that we are going to withdraw that security. But time and again, you've been proven wrong. The security is there, but at the same time, this is the biggest misfortune in Kashmir, as far as I'm concerned, is that for decades, throughout decades, this is not only about the BJP government. This is about successive governments. Those who have stood with the idea of Indian Kashmir have received absolutely no security, and they've been hunted like animals on the streets of Kashmir, and that is unfortunately what has happened again.
Rahul, another question that arises is about the collective silence of the Kashmiri society. There isn't enough condemnation of terrorism, no matter be it against Kashmiri Pandits, Sikhs, or Kashmiri Muslims, be it Mohammad Shafi Lone. We've seen in the past gruesome terror attacks against even local Muslims. The biggest of all, the lynching of Muhammad Ayub Pandit that happened outside the Jamia Masjid. We didn't see any protests happening. We don't see any collective protests happening from the political parties, be it PDP, NC, or People's Conference or Apni Party. This time we do see the mayor of Srinagar be doing rounds, perhaps for his own reasons, to these families. But what about this collective silence? And what about this term Kashmiriyat that is used each and every time that there is bloodshed, violence, and Islamist terror on the streets of Kashmir?
The collective silence is baffling, but it does not surprise me anymore. Not only is silence about what Kashmir has witnessed repeatedly in the last many years, there's also this attempt to kind of justify what is happening. You know, you've seen social media posts today by the so-called spokespersons of mainstream political parties in Kashmir, saying that, you know, if you're pushing outsiders, then this is what is going to happen. So, but you know, if there's a Kashmiri student who faces any kind of trouble anywhere in India, you raise a hue and cry and expect the civil society in mainland India to raise a hue and cry, and rightly so. But at the same time, you know, you can have a Golgappa anywhere in India. You can come to Pandara Road in Delhi and have a Golgappa. But if a Golgappa wala from Bihar wants to come to Kashmir and sell his ware, then suddenly becomes an outsider. We have seen xenophobic Facebook posts by the likes of the jailed journalist Asif Sultan, you know, who's a hero in the eyes of India's civil society. But you've seen those posts, right? Where, you know, you're clearly identifying a young non-Kashmiri as an outsider and asking people to kick him out. So at one level you're asking them to kick out, but you know, in the parlance of ISIS or Lashkar, kicking out means that you are wajibul qatl, you know, you're mandated to be killed. That is why you wear a body cam and go after a poor hapless poor man from Bhagalpur in Bihar, you know, who's perhaps thinking of his family or how much he has earned on that particular day, and you're shooting him dead with a pistol in cold-blooded murder. If this does not prompt you to say a word, then really shame on you.
Rahul, as someone who has documented history, who has documented what happened in 1990, exodus of Kashmiri Pandits, selective killings of prominent Kashmiri Pandit writers, politicians, even judges, uh, does this remind you of that period? And also, do you think this is the return of 1990? Because we've seen murmurs ever since the abrogation of 370 and ever since recent violence over the last few months that this could be a return of 1990. There have been these murmurs happening all across the Kashmiri society. What are your thoughts on that?
We don't know yet where this is going to be, but from all signals, you know, we can be almost certain that more of such killings will happen. Uh, if more of such killings happen, for example, you kill a Kashmiri Pandit here or a Hindu here and there, or even a member of the Sikh community, then imagine what will happen. You know, you already have people who are living under fierce psychosis. The Kashmiri society is almost 100% homogenized. Uh, you know, in a society which is progressively becoming radical. You know, the Kashmir of 90s was far less radical than what you have in terms of ISIS and TRF today. And you know, you look at the debates and posts on social media. You know, you'll see the extent of radicalization where people are justifying even these killings of poor innocent people who had nothing got to do with security establishment or any political party whatsoever. So I think if more such killings happen, you will definitely see some other kind of exodus. You know, it is already happening, albeit a little temporarily. But if more killings happen, then you'll see perhaps another spate of people who run, you know, outsiders, non-Kashmiris, even non-Muslim Kashmiris like Kashmiri Pandits or Sikhs, you know, who have roots in Kashmir for hundreds of years, thousands of years. It will trigger off another exodus of people who run their businesses, who have their government jobs, who come there, perhaps even as tourists. So you will see that happening if more killings happen.
One important question also arises, Rahul, about the geopolitical situation in the region, about the rise of the Taliban in Afghanistan, and how that is going to radicalize, first, of course, Pakistan, also embolden terror groups like the Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Toiba, of course, the Haqqani network being at the helm of affairs now in Kabul. How do you see that affecting Kashmir? Do you see any imminent dangers? The government of India seems to believe that imminently there's no threat, but perhaps in months or years from now, if the Taliban is continuously in control of Kabul and the Pakistan ISI being obviously in control of things in Afghanistan and Pakistan, things could get worse in Kashmir. Are you of the same opinion?
Well, we know already from jihadi chatter that the fall of Kabul is already proving to be a major morale booster among jihadi groups. You have already have had meetings of old Jash leaders uh, with the Haqqani network and the Taliban. But right now, as we know, Taliban is busy managing its own affairs in Afghanistan. But once the situation is a little under control and there are more control of things in Afghanistan, we should definitely expect more involvement of jihadi groups in Kashmir. What is terrifying is this new advent of Wilaya Hind. The NIA has already busted a few prominent cells of Wilaya Hind, but we know that it's not enough, and there are many more sleeper cells. And now this new mechanism where you do not need a coordinated attack. It's not an attack like Pulwama where you have to put a lot of things together, and there's always a possibility of intelligence labs here and there. Now you have you almost have these lone wolves in ones or twos, randomly selecting these targets and killing them, and it does not take much to appear behind someone without even him knowing about it, and then shooting him or her dead in cold blood. So I think in near future, we'll see more of these attacks happening in Kashmir Valley, and who knows that in near future we'll also see some bigger attacks happening like the Pulwama attack.
Rahul, that's been an interesting conversation. One last question before I let you go. You rightly pointed out about lone wolf attacks and the change in strategy of these terror groups. Sanjay Tikku, the head of the Kashmiri Pandits body in the valley, yesterday told me that there were, murmurs about a list of about 100 Kashmiri Pandits, Hindus, Sikhs, and others as soft targets that terrorists could target in the coming weeks, and that perhaps has already begun. There's also this question about the this entire ecosystem of terror that prevails in the valley. The NIA did come out hard on them. JNK police also to an extent. But do you see a situation where this ecosystem continues to exist? Because in many cases, sorry, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I lost you briefly.
Yeah, yeah. So there have been many questions about this ecosystem also, uh, where it is said that the ecosystem still exists, backing these terrorists ideologically and otherwise, giving ground support as well. So do you fear that the government is still myopic in its vision towards this ecosystem that prevails in the valley, and perhaps this will only encourage terrorism against the minorities?
Well, I have reiterated this time and again that after 30 years of fighting an insurgency in Kashmir, it is simply not enough for security agencies to come and say that in X number of months we have killed X number of militants. Killing terrorists is an important aspect of counterinsurgency doctrine, but it cannot be the end all of it. At some point in time, you also need to strike at the fountainhead of where these young Kashmiris are getting radicalized. But unfortunately, so far, barring a few baby steps, where you're dismissing this government employee or that government employee, I regularly interact with people who deal with Kashmir, and sometimes they are dismayed to say that people at the who are handling Kashmir's security at the top level have absolutely no understanding of things like Jamaat Islami and how dangerous it is. Now, we can all be very happy sharing pictures of Burhan Wani's father on 15th August unfurling the national flag in his school. But the fact remains that he's still the headmaster of that school. And, sometimes I shudder to even think about what education he would be imparting to those kids in that particular school in South Kashmir. So I call it the jihadi deep state. Unfortunately, even as you're killing the Naikus and Burhanwanis and the Lashkaris. The deep state is very much alive and kicking. Till you do not strike at the heart of this deep state, unfortunately, these incidents, you won't be able to stop them.
Well, the deep state of the Islamist terrorism and Islamist radicalism is still surviving in the Kashmir Valley, perhaps within the society itself. And how long will it take for the government, in fact, to wake up, to crack down on this Islamist terror, on this ecosystem, and perhaps realize that it's important to provide security to patriot Kashmiri Hindus and Sikhs who have been bearing the brunt of this terror for a very long time? If not in the last 32 years, then when? Thank you very much, Rahul Pandita, for speaking to us here on this digital exclusive on CNN News 18. News and reports will continue here on CNN News 18, where we will focus on the Kashmir Valley and the growing menace of terrorism. Thanks for watching.